Hello everybody and welcome to Cause and Effect, the show about Vetes. Due to some technical difficulties, we had a little break, but now we are back with what we call part 1.2 of the second episode of the second season of this webcast. Anywho, this is what happened when you party naked, so we are going to try and make the best of the situation. Anyway, we were talking about Toreador Antitribu, and we were just starting to discuss the most favorable, an awesome card that they play. Adam, talk a little bit about Palagrande.
Right, yeah. Before we cut off, I was just talking about how possibly Palagrande could constitute almost half the plus bleed, or more than half the plus bleed of the clan, at least of the damage that you put in your prey. Since you don't have any stealth, it's unavoidable that you'll be blocked, and your prey will probably want to block your bleed with presence. Like if Shayla Besron bleeds you with intimidation for 5, you'll be more likely to block that. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can just play Majesty and stay untapped to bounce or whatever. But what would probably come through are the Embraces. Like in the end, you will have 2 Embraces left maybe, and they can bleed for 2 each. And this is like the best case scenario for your prey even. So even if they get to choose, this will happen. And for this Palagrande, it's like it's effective plus bleed because of the Embraces.
Okay. So, Isaac?
Yeah, because this should all be taken in consideration with how big a part of the deck that's actually bleed cards, if you don't count the Palagrande. There are only a few bleed cards. In this particular deck, it's 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1, so that's 8 bleed cards. That's not a lot, even in a 62 card deck. So you will end up with card flow issues with this deck in the end, or rather, it would be an issue in another deck. But in this particular deck, it's not an issue because every vampire got at least plus 2 bleed, so you end up bleeding a lot without cards, and that's the key to being successful with this deck is Palagrande. Because as Adam said, letting 2 or 3 Embraces bleed you once each, that's not the biggest of deals if there weren't Palagrande in play. But if Palagrande is, that's 4 or 6 bleed, and you can imagine yourself having had a government conditioning in your pool, that is an issue. Yeah. So, and also this kind of outspreadness, if I may, with the bleed. You have many guys doing a little pool damage. It's a good way to deal with bounces.
Yeah, it's awesome against bounces. How do you think like the Palagrande keeps up with other like similar cards like the Week of Nightmares? Adam.
Well, yeah, this comparison is so heavily in Palagrande's favor. It's plus 1 bleed on all the vampires without a disadvantage, and it's not once per game. It's incredibly powerful. It's kind of like I don't know what to call it. Poor Radlos. If you compare it to Palagrande, it's an incredibly strong card. I think this could possibly be one of the strongest cards in the game. Like if you just disregard the requirement for the card.
Yeah. What about
with another comparison with Week of Nightmares being Week of Nightmares may only be played once each game. Yeah. So if it gets sudden reversaled, Palagrande wins anyways because you try to play a new the next turn.
Okay. How about the Song of Pawn then, Isaac?
That comparison is a bit different because that's for 1 turn only, and well, I guess the comparison is relevant in one way, but I actually tried to abuse it once with Embraces, and it ended up not working that well.
Okay, so
because then you get your Embraces blocked, then they lose 1 blood, and then they have failed to bleed, then they take 1 damage in discard phase. So you end up with like 6 embraces in torpor.
Yeah.
Not as great.
Yeah, we should probably mention, I think most of you guys know, but Song of Pawn is, Adam, you know it better than me.
Right, yeah, it's an action card for Chaosid that is give them +1 bleed, but if they fail to bleed, they'll take damage. It's for changelings as well. Doesn't
Yeah,
do damage.
so Milan can bleed for 1.
Oh,
Don't
for
forget,
2.
For 2?
don't forget get Draven Softfoot.
Yeah, this comparison is... It's not a master card, so in a way Song of Pawn is better. It costs a pool, so it's kind of worse. It's only for 1 turn, so it's kind of worse. It's for a stealth bleed clan, so it's kind of better. I don't know. It's a hard comparison to make, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
But as Isak said, he tried to abuse it, but it's so bad because of the embraces go to like torpor when they get...
I think the stealth is required because of the disadvantage.
Yeah, you need to stealth bleed, but then it's great. Then you have like 4 dominate minions who can bleed for 5 each. 7 each instead of 6, so it's great. Someone pointed out in the chat is that you can, instead of starting, you can start by bleeding with your embraces when you play one of these decks, and do that as a trick, try to trick your prey into blocking, or trick your prey into thinking that he should not block and therefore just take the pool damage, and then you use that part of the strategy. Might seem obvious to some, but I don't think it's that obvious really. That you can trick around, and if you have a good poker face, you can get a long way by being tricky in what action you choose to do when.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, you just take out your guys, try to get as many guys as you can, and using Majesty when you're blocked to do other actions, and then play Palaground and then bleed.
Yeah. Change the target should be reserved for when your prey is waking, since then it's actually a gain in cards, or it's a gain in untaps, or what you want to call it. Using change the target just when they block you, it's not that worthwhile, but if they have played a card and playing change the target, it's really good.
Okay. So, basically, but you're breeding, which costs a lot of blood, and then you play Majesty when you get blood, which costs blood. How do you manage your blood in this deck, Isak?
After a Majesty, you could go hunt if you don't have any better action. That's not a very good way to manage your blood, but it's Masters. As I've stated before, Masters are very, very good when it comes to blood gain. And in this particular deck, there's 1 life in the city, there's 1 Giant's Blood, and one the Coven. But having so many actions, you can always use... Not always, but sometimes you can use 1 or 2 actions to actually go hunt in preparation of a launch. So you do some actions, you do a little pool damage, you hunt with a few guys and keep your blood high so that you can afford further embraces, further majesties, further air revelations and such.
Okay.
I find that you just, like, if you have a shot at winning with this game, or with this deck, you're normally winning before your blood runs out. It's efficient enough that it won't be a problem. And especially if you have, say you have 4 minions out, and 4 like discipline minions out, and then maybe you play 2 embraces, that's 6 minions. They will have between 4 and 1 blood each. That's quite a lot of blood on the vampires actually, when you have your setup done. And you will only use that marginally until you're actually lounging. It's like for bounces and possibly some... Yeah, Mind Numb, it's a good card. Mind Numb, possibly a block and hit for 1. Since you're not likely to block anything, that's not going to hit you for 1. So you'll take a little bit of damage until you lounge, but when you lounge, you will still have enough blood, and that first lounge is really pivotal, I think. It has to go well, and if it goes well, you'll be able to play the rest of the game with maybe 4 minions instead of 6.
Okay. So, how do you play against this deck?
Depending on what you yourself have in hand, but blocking early on is very strong, especially if you block the embraces.
Yeah.
If you stay cool and block the embraces, well, you have to make a choice, because it's not obvious. Often I see people without any forethought or hesitation letting the embrace go and blocking when the embrace hunts afterwards. And that might be a good strategy, depending on the situation and such. It's very expensive for this deck to actually go rescue the vampires out of torpor, but they're also in play. They are vampires when they're play, and when you have successfully done the embrace action, they're kind of hard to kill because they're vampires. Vampires are hard to kill. So, but getting the embraces is the key, because if this deck is down to, like Adam said, 4 discipline minions, like crypt cards in play, then you're actually in a kind of bad situation, because you probably only have 2 that can bounce. You might have 2 that can play Majesty, and you have 1 or 2 low caps that probably can't do that much, and that's very manageable. It's still a dangerous deck. If they get Palaground into play, they have a Blade for 8, and then have some bleed cards, but it's manageable. It's when you get like 4 embraces into play that it's really gets tough.
Adam, any other advices?
I'd like to touch on that, what Isaac said about the embrace actually being in play. If you put it in torpor, so you need to compare recruiting an embrace for 2 blood, putting it into play and it's hunting, with rescuing an embrace from torpor, paying 2 blood and it's hunting.
Yeah.
There is a difference, and that's with either the Coven in play, which this deck has, which means it can bleed. So say you have like Jost Werner, Shayla Mesrin. She bleeds, she plays Majesty. She still has 2 blood left to rescue an embrace. She will do that. And then you can use Coven on the embrace, or you can use Patronage, which there are 2 copies of in the deck, to make that embrace bleed.
Yeah, and what does Patronage do?
It's an action to untap a younger Toreador Antitribu, I believe. I will...
Yeah, and it costs 1 pool.
Yeah, but if that means you'll get an oust, it's worth it. So, but my point is that embrace in torpor has usages that are not the same as an embrace in your hand. Since the embrace has to hunt, it says on the card, has to hunt this turn.
Yeah, if you recruit it, so it's always, or not always, but many times it's better to actually rescue an embrace from torpor than to bring out one from your hand. Yeah. Or more worthwhile, I'd say.
But I think that what we talked about earlier, the blood management, is a big problem. So if you find a way to remove 2 blood from this deck early on, if you're cross table, I think that'll, and you know you're gonna face this deck eventually. This deck will get its prey, and you'll have it as a predator eventually. If you can remove 2 blood before that, it will pay dividends eventually, because of how blood is kind of a scarce resource in this deck.
Okay. Yeah, so quickly before we take a break, I think we should talk about the art scam. It features 4 art scam in a deck that has bounce and a lot of other actions. Why is that, Adam?
It's a good action. I think it's just because it's a good action. You have Majesty and change the target, and this can be played without disciplines, so the Embraces can do it as well. And it's a kind of a non-threatening action. Sometimes the Predator will block it, but I think it's worth the card slots. Maybe not 4 of them. I would probably include a bit fewer than 4 art scams, but it's a really good card nonetheless. 2 pool for an action that's a good action, especially when you have as many actions as this actions available, I should say, as this deck has.
Yeah. Another thing with the art scan being that in a way it works a bit like an enchant kindred, but it doesn't require superior presence and doing it on a younger vampire. So in a way it sort of compensates for the crypt not being optimal to make a good govern chain or superior enchant kindred chain.
Okay. I know. Any last thoughts before the break, Adam?
So, as I said, this is pretty much the standard. This is what I think about when I hear Toreador Antitribu, the framework.
Yep.
So, it's not that, it's not revolutionary, the deck. It's just really good.
Yeah.
Another thing that we should touch on, it's 3 delaying tactics in this deck because you don't want to get Ancilla Empowered or Anarchist Uprised played. So we should probably mention that because it's kind of obvious. If you have 8 minions into play, and Anarchist Uprising is the difference between you being in the game and you being out of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a lot of defenses, as you see in the 62 cards, and that many reaction cards.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's heavily on defense as well.
Yeah, and you can afford that because so much of your ousting capabilities is put into the Palagrand.
Yeah. Okay. I think that will conclude the first part. Hopefully, to the second part, we'll have not have any technical difficulties, but we won't. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, we'll see you on the next part. Bye.
Goodbye.